Today on the Locked On Blues podcast, the St. Louis Blues continue their up and down season, beating the New York Islanders 7-4 in a game where they almost blew a 5-1 lead in the third period, and then losing to the division-leading Winnipeg Jets 5-2 in pretty unconvincing fashion. Jordan Binnington been benched. Craig Berube had a lot of comments, interesting comments about the state of the team, as did Jordan Binnington. Plus, with Tage Thompson's recent historic 5-goal performance, did the Blues lose the Ryan O'Reilly trade? I don't know. All those questions and more answered on today's episode of Locked On Blues. Don't go anywhere.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Locked On Blues podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and your number one source for Blues content. I'm your host, as always, Josh Hyman. If this is your first time tuning into the show, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. You can find the show on YouTube as well if you're just listening to it at Locked On Blues or on any podcast platform. It is completely free wherever you get your podcasts. If you're returning to the show, this is your first time. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for making Locked On Blues your first listen every single day. Appreciate you guys out there. So, busy episode today. Before we get into it, though, I want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, there's a lot to talk about on today's episode. There's two games to get through, the game against the Islanders and then the game against the Jets. There's the comments made by Craig Berube about the state of the team. There is the Athletic article that Jordan Binnington gave an interview talking about the Zucker incident, his play this season, the team's play this season, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that Jordan Binnington has essentially been benched for Thomas Greiss. And then Tage Thompson going on an absolute rampage, scoring 5 goals against the Columbus Blue Jackets, including 4 in the first period, I'm pretty sure, which begs the question, did the Blues lose the Ryan O'Reilly trade? And, you're going to have to wait and see my opinion on that one. But let's just jump into recent play from the St. Louis Blues. So if you've been living under a rock, if you haven't watched a game this season, the Blues have been inconsistent. That's the number one keyword that keeps coming up on this podcast is consistent. And the biggest thing for them that they were struggling with early in the season was inconsistent offense. Throughout that 8-game losing streak, they couldn't score for the life of them. They were averaging like 2.2 goals a game or something pathetic like that. Defense and goaltending was pretty strong. But the offense was nowhere to be found. And then all of a sudden, the offense picked it back up. The defense and goaltending stayed where it was. And the Blues went on a 7-game winning streak. And it looked like, hey, we might have something this season. Like, yeah, they lost 8 in a row, and that was awful. But they proved that they can win a lot of games. And they beat some tough teams in that stretch. And things were looking good. And then all of a sudden, the offense continued that pace, and that sort of was expected. The offense was never supposed to be as bad as it was, but the defense and arguably the goaltending was overachieving a little bit. And then all of a sudden, lately, the defense / goaltending has been horrendous. I think the Blues have allowed 4+ goals in their last 8 games. They've allowed 3 goals in a period, their last 4 games or something like that. The offense has been fine, but just fine. Obviously they scored a lot of goals in that Islanders game. They scored a couple in the Winnipeg game, but they were never really in it. They were down 3-0 before the halfway mark of that game. So, it's frustrating because the inconsistency has moved from just one aspect, and it's like, well, now that the offense has figured itself out, the offense is playing better. The defense and goaltending has taken a huge step back. And a lot of people are saying, oh, you can't just blame Binnington or you can't just blame Greiss. And sure, the defense has been really weak. They've been allowing a lot of grade A opportunities, but Binnington and to a lesser extent Greiss have both allowed a lot of soft softies amidst this stretch. And, well, a lot of those softies came off of defensive breakdowns or whatever, what have you. Still, some saves that you would have liked to have them had, and saves that I think they would have made, earlier in the season when they were playing at a higher level. And it's led to Binnington completely losing his cool and getting benched. Berube has had some really harsh comments. I didn't even get a chance to talk about them last episode. I guess I'll go over them briefly here. Berube basically said those antics don't contribute to winning at all. Just stop the puck. And as much as those antics are part of who Jordan Binnington is as a player, and I think, those antics when he's winning are something that drives him and something that gives him that motivation and that energy to succeed. It's also something that I think takes him out of the game when he's struggling. And I think it's a perfect example of, going against the Pittsburgh Penguins and getting pulled and then ejected, which the ejection was really just for show as he had already been pulled from the game, but gets ejected for trash talking a guy who had just scored on him. And it's like, I don't know, it's got to be a tough look for his teammates to just watch him, lose his cool like that. I think they know that he can be better. He knows that he can be better, but I think Jordan Binnington's also frustrated with the play in front of him, which I think he has every right to be frustrated with the play in front of him, but that doesn't mean he doesn't take any of the blame. And if you read that Athletic article that he gave, that interview, it definitely seemed like he was doing a lot of deflecting in terms of, I think he did say at one point, like, I've got to be better. But at the end of the day, it seemed like his frustrations were more with the team as a whole, which was a little concerning to see. I hope there's not like a divide in the locker room. I hope players aren't growing a little bit tired of Binnington and his antics. Now, obviously, that's just speculation. And there's no backing to that. They might be completely on his side. The players might be totally in Binnington's corner and supporting him and disagreeing with Craig Berube's comments and all that stuff, because I know players haven't been the biggest fans of Berube being so critical in the media. But who knows? That's all just speculation, and that's not the type of podcast that I have here. I'm not going to take unsubstantiated rumors and run with it. But at the end of the day, it's not the type of thing that you want to see your team in the headlines for. You don't want to see your team in the headlines because the goalie is getting himself ejected from games and causing antics and getting benched, blah, 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 blah. So it's just frustrating. There's a little bit more that I'll get into here in this upcoming second segment before briefly going through the Winnipeg and Islanders games and then talking about Tage Thompson and Ryan O'Reilly. Before I get to any of that, though, I want to tell you guys about Bet Online. Now, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Football, basketball, hockey, soccer, even esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts just like this one, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. I'll be right back with the second half of today's episode. All right, so a couple comments that various Blues members have made to the media. Jordan Binnington in that athletic article. Seems like he's taking the benching in stride. He said, "Yeah, it's just about results for me all the way through. No complaining. I'll pick myself back up, and I'm going to go back out there, keep working and finding a way. I've just got to keep focusing on my job, and yeah, I'll find a way to do it." So, seems like a little bit of accepting the blame there. He did have some comments about the Stahl hit or the Zucker play, and he had a hard time accepting responsibility there, which, the Stahl thing I don't have as much of a problem with, but sticking your arm out at Jason Zucker when he's going behind the net, that's just a cheap shot. And Binnington basically come out and saying it pissed him off that Zucker went down when he wasn't really hurt. I don't love that. You don't expect to be hit in the head with a goalie glove when you're skating around the net. Those things are big. Those things are heavy. And was it, a potential career-ending injury or anything crazy like that? No, it wasn't the most malicious thing in the world. But at the same time, flip the script. If Brayden Schenn was going around the net and insert goalie here, clocked in the face, Blues fans, myself included, would be pretty upset. and would be livid at the goalie that did that. So, you got to accept that one as a bit of a cheap shot, and it's what led to eventually him getting ejected and all that stuff. So, it is what it is. But the thing that I don't love about Jordan Binnington is he said, "I'm not here to waste my effing time every game. It's the NHL. Let's go." Before that, he said it just gets frustrating over the period of time when it's the same thing you're seeing and you expect things to be different. Pretty much alluding to the play of his team in front of him, which, as much as I think he's right in the sense that he is not getting support of the team in front of him, it's a little bit disheartening to see that divide. You would expect or at least hope for the professional answer, even if he feels deep down like he's getting screwed over by his team, which he very well might be. It's disheartening to see him say that in the media. Word gets around, players are going to hear about that. So it's not great, but at the same time, I think he's not wrong. The blame definitely falls on him more than I think he's willing to accept. But at the same time, he has definitely been getting a raw deal from the defense, from the offense, whatever it may be. Goal support's not there. So I think all around, it's just a big freaking mess. You can't just point your finger at one player or one aspect of the team. The offense is very much responsible for going quiet at times. The defense is very much responsible for allowing, too many grade A opportunities and failing to break the puck out and stuff like that. And then the goaltenders are responsible for, letting in 1 to 2 goals a game over the last couple games that they would have liked to have back. But at the end of the day, like I said, you can't just place the blame on one aspect. And Craig Berube was talking about that a lot. He said, quote, "There's too many guys, veteran guys, young guys. If they don't come to the rink and think about the team and put the team first, we're not going anywhere. And right now, I don't see that happening." That is about as scathing as you'll hear from Craig Berube. It sits up there with like a John Tortorella quote, just in terms of telling it like it is. It starts to make me wonder if the players are going to start to tune Craig Berube out. Not saying Craig Berube is a poor coach by any means, but look at what the Boston Bruins have done this year. They had a great, great coach in Bruce Cassidy, still doing good things in Vegas. The failures of the Boston Bruins were nothing to do with him. But the players had just gotten to a point where they had heard the same coach say the same things for too many years, and a change of voice was important. And now they have like the best record so far in NHL history up until this point. All because they brought in a new coach who, pretty much had the same game plan, but said it a little bit differently. And with Craig Berube coming out and bashing the team this publicly, it just worries me that this is going to get worse before it gets better. I hope that he can come out there and unite the team. I love Chief as a coach. I think he did a great job in 2019. I think he does a really good job of maximizing the players that he has, getting the most out of the players that he has. But there gets to a point where you've had the same boss, not even just coach in sports, but you've had the same boss for a couple of years. You've been listening to him say the same thing. No matter how right that person may be, no matter how correct they may be, you can just start to tune them out, especially when you're losing like this. I'm not saying Craig Berube should be fired because I don't think the responsibility falls on him at all. I think it's the effort of the players, but it would certainly be an interesting conversation to say, what would happen if the Blues got a fresh voice behind the bench? Would they be able to turn things around? Would that increase the motivation a little bit more? I don't think we're quite at that point yet. I think we've got about another month or so before we really start looking at, is it time to look for a new head coach, similar to the timeline where Mike Yeo was fired. That being said, though, we're reaching a point where it could be too late. Blues are 12-15, 6 in the Central. They're not fully out of it yet, but another few weeks of play like this, and they're going to be very much on the outside looking into the playoff spot. And you can't really play around with that too much longer. So we'll see. It's really about waiting until I think this team settles. I don't think we've really seen the norm of this team yet. We've seen the best of this team. We've seen the worst of this team. But I still really don't feel like we know what this team is capable of yet, because it's like it's Jekyll and Hyde. They looked so good in that 7-game win streak, and honestly, they looked so good in like points, throughout the Islanders game and such. I guess to quickly touch on those games, I've been rambling here. Islanders game was great, minus that third period. I was fully expecting them to blow that lead and lose, blow a 5-1 lead in the third period. But that was like perfect Blues hockey. They had given up 1 goal up until late in the third period. They had scored 2 goals really quickly. We're up 5-1, and that looked good. That was very promising. They gave up a bunch of goals. It got cut close, but they held on. Encouraging stuff there. And then Winnipeg was just, the exact opposite. A perfect example of what's been plaguing the Blues this year is they go down 3-0 before the halfway mark of the game. And it's like they've just given up already. They don't even really feel like they try to get back in the game. That's something I talked about earlier a couple episodes ago, just the fact that the Blues of the past, and even somewhat the Blues we've seen this season, like the game against the Florida Panthers, where they have a really uncanny ability to never really feel like they're out of games. And this year it feels like they waved the white flag very early in games, because they frequently find themselves down multiple goals, early in the second period. So it's just a motivation factor there. It felt like, that Winnipeg game was over before the 10-minute mark of the second period, even though, obviously down 3-0, that's a tall task. But I feel like the Blues in 2019, or if you're watching like a Colorado Avalanche game or a Boston Bruins game, I know I keep mentioning the Bruins, but they're on in my house all the time. It's easy to be an observer. A good team, they might be down 3-0, no matter how late in the game it is. You're still like, you know what, they have a chance. And it's like, so early game, like second period, I shouldn't be like, oh man, I kind of want to turn this game off. So it really just feels like it's not a personnel thing, and it's just an effort thing. It's a mentality thing, which gives me hope that it's not too late to turn it around, and they could still turn it around, but we'll see. Anyways, in this third and final segment, I'm going to kind of change gears, talk about Tage Thompson and his success, and answer the question, did the Blues lose the Ryan O'Reilly trade? Stay tuned. All right. I teased it at the beginning of the episode. A lot of you guys might have just skipped right forward to this point. Like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Did the Blues lose the Ryan O'Reilly trade? Short answer, no. They didn't. Long answer, you cannot lose a trade where the piece that you get back was instrumental to you winning a Stanley Cup. Obviously, Tage Thompson is having an otherworldly season right now. He is one of the best hockey players on the planet. He is scoring goals in a ridiculous clip. He scored 5 goals in a game, 4 goals in a period. He looks unbelievable out there, and he looks like he might be a franchise cornerstone for the Buffalo Sabres moving forward. However, let's just flash back to the first season of Ryan O'Reilly with the St. Louis Blues. He has a ridiculously good regular season, close to point per game, probably the best forward for the Blues that year. Best defensive forward in the league, wins the Selke Trophy. Amazing stuff there. That's already a great trophy to add to his trophy case. Leads the Blues to a Stanley Cup final. Blues get the Western Conference, for whatever the heck it's called. That's trophy number 2. He goes on to tie a record set by none other than Wayne Gretzky, scoring a goal in 5 consecutive Stanley Cup final games. Including some huge goals to help the Blues get some wins over the Boston Bruins, before helping lead the Blues to their first ever Stanley Cup in franchise history. Obviously, he wins the Conn Smythe, the most valuable player, wins the cup, whatever. You don't win that Stanley Cup without Ryan O'Reilly. Obviously, revisionist history, you go back and say, oh, what if they swapped in Klim Kostin instead of Tage Thompson? Sure. The other part of that long answer is, does Tage Thompson develop into this player in the Blues system? Probably not. Even if he stuck with the Blues, even if he was still in the Blues system, he would have had a lot more guys to outplay to earn the ice time that he's getting in Buffalo right now. If he's playing center, you're outplaying Braden Shen, Robert Thomas, Ryan O'Reilly, Ivan Barbashev, all those guys. It would have been really hard for him to find the amount of ice time that he needed to succeed with the St. Louis Blues. I don't think Tage Thompson is, putting up these ridiculous goal totals if he had stuck with the Blues this whole time. I think he always had that potential, but as he himself stated, the Blues just kind of weren't the team for him to showcase that potential. He was a little bit more of a raw prospect. He needed a little bit more development than a guy like Jordan Kyrou, or Robert Thomas, who were also potentially rumored in that Ryan O'Reilly trade. And at the end of the day, looking back, do you get rid of Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou in that trade over Tage Thompson? Absolutely not. They're the cornerstones of the franchise moving forward. You could argue that Tage Thompson is better than one or both of those guys. But again, he wouldn't have had that same development had he had stayed with the St. Louis Blues. This is a perfect example of a win-win trade. Buffalo got a guy that is very exciting to watch, very talented, very skilled, and is going to be a huge piece of their team moving forward. And the Blues got a guy that led them to a Stanley Cup and was and is their captain and is incredible with developing the young guys. It is a complete win-win trade. If you go back and you don't pull the trigger on that trade, the Blues do not win a Stanley Cup. But sure, they have another young piece to their roster that's exciting to watch now. So, no, the Blues did not lose the Ryan O'Reilly trade. It was a win-win. At the time, it looked like the Buffalo Sabres got absolutely fleeced, and that has obviously changed. They have made it a lot better than the initial perception was. But still, at the end of the day, win-win trade. Good for both sides. That being said, that is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. It is completely free wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On Blues. Leave a comment. I try to read most of the comments, all of the comments. You know the drill. Follow Locked On Blues on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Hyman NHL. Locked On Blues is at Locked On Blues, obviously. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a wonderful weekend. And as always, let's go Blues.